Good evening, everyone. We start today's program with greetings of peace and prosperity. Please note that this event is being recorded and will be posted on our website. Let me begin by introducing myself and our team. I, Yuvish Bahati, will be your host. Arshad Khwaja, Hassan Shah, and Mustafa Siddiq will be moderating questions for today's program. Please simply use raise hand features as they will be called upon. Hassan and Mustafa actually are tied up at another conference call, so they might join in between, but Arshad is already on the call. Let me take this opportunity to thank all our UAF members who are present here today. Without your support, we would not be able to drive this initiative forward. For those that are joining for the first time, United American Foundation is a public advocacy group based in Harford County. We are a nonpartisan entity that strives to equip the citizens of our county with unity in amplifying political voice. Our vision is to strengthen residents with full awareness of political process to make an educated choice at the time of voting. For that purpose, we have started virtual series called Getting to Know Your Legislatives. For those that are interested in volunteering, please contact Hassan Shah for more information. Today, we are honored to have Sheriff Jeff Gahler as our guest. Born in Alton, Maryland, Gahler attended North Harford High School. He is a strong advocate for continual self-improvement and education, having earned his bachelor's and master's degree all while employed by the state police. That's an achievement, Sheriff.
Thank you.
He has taken his commitment further by returning to teach in public safety leadership program at Johns Hopkins University. Jeff was elected as county sheriff in 2014 and re-elected in 2018. As primary law enforcement agency, sheriff's office is responsible for providing law enforcement, correctional services, and court services. Sheriff Gahler leads a workforce of more than 600 sworn and civilian personnel and oversees an annual budget of more than $100 million. Nationally, Sheriff Gahler sorry about that here. Nationally, Sheriff Gahler is a leader on addressing immigration crisis at our border and our communities. Sheriff Gahler is an active participant with the Federation for American Immigration Reform and supports federal 287G program, a correctional-based program that identifies and removes criminal illegal immigrants from our country. Jeff resides in Forest Hill area of the county with his wife Sonia and with their two daughters. Without any further delay, let's welcome our Sheriff, Jeff Gahler. Sheriff, floor is all yours.
Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for the invitation to address the group this evening. I read a little bit once Eric Roby scheduled this. I read a little bit from the website, and I think it's great. Getting involved in politics back in the 2000, I ran for sheriff in 2010 unsuccessfully before I ran again in 14 and won. And I can tell you what I learned getting into politics after 28 years in the state police was how few people participate in the legislative, in the voting process. We've had some elections with some big turnouts, but when you're talking big turnouts, you're talking something like 30 or 40%. Every citizen should be out there voting in their elections. That's how important it is for who we put into these positions of leadership or responsibility, depending on whether it's anything from school board to sheriff to clerk of the court to county executive to governor to president. I was shocked at how many different events you would go to or different organizations. There just wasn't that sort of pathway to reach the community as someone who wanted to seek elected office. And I applaud this group for coming together and forming this organization that is targeted at doing just that. So again, thank you for inviting me this evening. I don't know, it was touched on there in my bio and introduction, and thank you for that. But I did spend 28 years in the Maryland State Police. So coming up right out of high school, I joined the state police as a cadet and rose over the years to the rank of captain. And one thing that struck me going through the ranks was always trying to get to the next level where I thought some of the concepts, some of the ideas I had on public safety, on things to do, we could try to implement them. And I found out that in the state police, more of a bureaucratic governor's office, just this is the way it's always been done. We're not going to look for new ways to do things. Don't bring this. You go learn something new at a training class. You're not going to bring it here and give it a try. That kind of mentality in the state police, and that was why I sought the office of sheriff. Here in Harford County and sheriffs across the state and across the country, they're actually put in office by the people that we serve, and it is truly. I answer directly to the citizens in this county, and who have entrusted me to make these decisions. And over my 8 years, nearly 8 years in office, we've been able to implement a lot of programs, try a lot of different things, and we've been very successful. And I'm delighted to say that over uniform crime reporting, over these 7.5 years, I guess, so far, we've seen violent crime nearly cut in half. 42% decrease in violent crime and a 52% decrease in property crime. So overall, that is a 50% crime reduction in uniform crime reporting. And real quick, what uniform crime reporting is, since the 70s, it's called UCR, Uniform Crime Reporting. It's a system that the Federal Bureau of Investigation came up with in order to track crime statistics, certain categories, your most serious crimes, murder, rape, robbery, arson, theft, burglary. There's a couple others that I'm missing real quickly here. Motor vehicle theft and aggravated assault. So those fields are tracked. And for the last 50 years, we have reported to the state, and the state reports to the federal government. We have never had lower crime numbers than what we are seeing for our agency here in Harford County at the end of 2020. And I can tell you, unfortunately, we have now moved into FBI is doing away with UCR, doing away with uniform crime reporting, and they're going to a new system called NIBRS, National Incident-Based Reporting. So now we can't compare our 21 numbers back to our 20 numbers. So it's going to be a couple of years to try to get a new baseline, but I was delighted with the fact that much of what we have done, again, led to a very low crime rate for our county overall.
We cannot hear him.
So yeah, somewhere in there I went on, I don't know how I went on mute, but I went on mute.
No, you're okay now.
Okay. Did you lose me just there at the end?
Just about 10 seconds ago.
Okay. I was just wrapping up on the uniform crime reporting and the conversion to NIBRS, National Incident-Based Reporting. And the only other thing I wanted to touch on real quickly is the heroin epidemic, which is something I ran on running for this office, and then make sure I didn't go back on mute. And we have implemented so many strategies from a law enforcement standpoint. First and foremost, we have targeted the dealers. You know, anyone that we can identify who's out there dealing heroin, dealing fentanyl in our community, we've targeted that person, not the user. We actually were not charging people. We were actually not charging people who were the victims of an overdose, even before Maryland changed the law to the Good Samaritan law, so that you cannot charge currently. So we were doing that initially as part of our effort, and I think they took the idea from us and changed it to legislation. But working with the county executive, working with our county and community partners, we're one of the only, maybe the only jurisdiction in the state that has seen a decline in our overdoses the last couple of years. It spiked up in 2018, and we have seen a consistent decline since. I can tell you, we sit here today, and January is behind us. we have officially 0 fatal overdoses on the books for January for the first time in the last at least 6 years. Unfortunately, I know that we have 2 that are pending autopsy, so that number is not going to stay at 0. But it's again an indication that we are doing a lot of things right here. And I can speak a whole lot about opioids, but anytime I give a talk, I always like to hear from the community, that those people who have invited me to speak, so I know I'm addressing exactly what they have questions about. One thing I get a whole lot before I open it up is where are we with our body camera program? And I'm happy to say I asked for body cameras, and our deputies wanted them. I asked for them for the last 3 years in our budget. The first 2 years, I did not get them funded. And then George Floyd, unfortunately, that incident happened where George Floyd died on the streets in Minneapolis, and everyone came screaming at us about why we don't have them. And it was not because we didn't want them or because we hadn't asked for funding. It was documented in our capital request, but we got the funding. The county executive stepped up, provided the funding in advance of the legislation that came out of Annapolis. And I know that some of the legislators want to take a lot of credit for doing that, but they deserve no credit here in Harford County, because our county executive, our community members spoke up, our county executive stepped up and funded that. And as of the end of December, all 300 plus deputies here at the Harford County Sheriff's Office have body cameras. One of the first things I did when I came into office in 2015, 2014, December, I took office. Beginning in 15, the in-car camera fleet, ahead of body cameras, had pretty much gone to scrap here. It was junk, they were non-functional. So we spent about $3 million the first 2 years I was here just putting state-of-the-art in-car cameras back in, and they have proven their weight worth their weight in gold on showing us exactly what has happened on many scenes. And we knew body cameras would do the same thing, and that's exactly what we're seeing with body cameras. If it shows us a bad cop, then good, we will address it. But if it shows us 99% of the time, it shows us good police work, and it's good evidence. So we're all behind it. So with that, I don't know. I can talk about some other things, or I don't know how much time. I don't want to take too much time in the opening and not give questions. I'll leave it to.
No, feel free to go ahead and educate us on your future plans as well, and then shortly after that we'll start a Q&A session.
Sure. The future plans, I am running for re-election. This is an election year for all 24 sheriffs across the state. I'm expecting to be re-elected, and part of what I hope to do in the next term, just recently, again with the county executive's agreement to funding, there have been no additional law enforcement deputies added to patrol in Harford County in the last 16 years. We've added to school policing. Our county has gone from about 240,000 people. The last census was 260,000 people, 244 to 260,000. So an additional 16,000 residents with not one additional deputy added to the street. So recently the county executive, I've been after him for several years for a precinct out somewhere. I wanted it between the college and Aberdeen on that 22 thruway. So the old Heat Center, which was owned by the University of Maryland and somewhere along the way transferred to county ownership. The county executive, it sat vacant. I asked him several times, told him I wanted it for a precinct in our training academy. And just here recently, we made that announcement. So he's agreed to fund that project. It's a complete gut of the building. And we are requesting 49 additional deputies in addition with that precinct over the next 3 fiscal years. So first and foremost, one of my goals for the future is to continue to meet the needs of our community from the Harford County Sheriff's Office with appropriate staffing here at the office. And we are short in what we do currently on the road. Our detention center, we also need staff up there. And of course, this is a big challenge. Anytime you get into personnel costs, it's a big dollar when you tell the county executive you need 36 additional correctional deputies and 49 new law enforcement deputies. It's a pretty big bill, but I think over the next few years we can start working to that end. And when I talk about one of my goals since I was first elected, our detention center was actually built in 3 phases. There's a portion that was built in the 70s, a portion that was built in the 90s, and then the most recent expansion was opened around 2010. And unfortunately, the administration at that time made no plans to staff it. Although they had plans to build it as a capital project, they didn't do the personnel costs. You know, it's like, I'll give an example, it's like doubling the size of your house, but having to sell your house because you didn't expect the BG&E bill to go up. For the last now 12 years, if you've been through Forest Hill, you've seen the jail, the 4-story largest part of the facility off to the right-hand side, if you're going by, that sits empty. It hasn't been, we have one of the most modern new jail facilities in the state, even though it's 12 years old, and it has only a couple little sections are in use. The majority of it's empty. Unfortunately, we are still housing many inmates in the 1970 portion of the jail, which is the oldest. It's not a modern correctional way of holding people in incarceration. It's more of cells within cells, the old linear design where the deputy never really, other than doing a walk on the tier, never really interacts with the inmates much. The new section is all direct supervision units where the deputy's actually in the housing unit with those in custody. It is safer. It's actually safer for the deputy. It's safer for the inmate, and it's more program friendly where we can bring programs into the inmates. So that is something that I had hoped to get open by now, and I've had many chats with the county executive about that. That will be a goal for next term. It requires us, that 4-story building requires us to have 6 additional posts. And when you take 6 additional posts across a schedule of 24/7, 365, it ends up with training days and days off that we need 36 additional people to do that work. And so far we haven't got it. Our jail population has also fallen with some of the legislation that has come out of Annapolis, the Justice Reinvestment Act, which puts people in jail for shorter amount of times or not at all. The bond, looking at the bond where they're releasing people without having to post bond before their trials, and with COVID. There's been a great effort by, I can tell you, the public defender and others and the courts have been closed. There's been a great effort to keep people out of jail during this time, although our jail has been one of the most COVID-free places. We have had a couple of outbreaks, but it's been one of the most protected places from COVID, probably in the county. Our population has fallen from about 450 people, and we run about 260 now. So we're about running 200 people less. So it's hard to ask for additional people when you have a lot less inmates that you need to look out for their care and custody. You did in my intro mention the 287G program, the partnership that we have with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. And this is something I ran on going back to the 10 campaign, which I was unsuccessful. And again, in 14, this program has been around since President Clinton, every Democrat and Republican president since. And what it is, it's strictly a corrections-based program. You hear a lot of things about it, which just are not true, but it's a corrections-based program. A law enforcement deputy and a correctional deputy are 2 different distinct roles and responsibilities. A correctional deputy cannot go on the street, pick up a police car and go out and handle a call for service, go to someone's house, you know, in response to a 911 call. They can't make traffic stops. They're not out there on the street with this ICE training looking for people who are in our country illegally. The police officers do not have the training that the correctional deputies get. Strictly what it is if someone's arrested by any police organization, and it doesn't matter who they are, what the color of their skin is, what their sex is, if they are brought to the Harford County Detention Center by the state police, by us, Aberdeen, Bel Air, Havre de Grace, Natural Resources, any police department, bring someone to our processing center. They're fingerprinted, photographed, just like we do with anybody to see if another jurisdiction wants them. In addition to that, we do an ICE, we have certain deputies trained by Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, and they can do a ICE questionnaire, and that determines that'll tell us whether they're in the country legally or not. Overstayed their visa, entered illegally, and if they're in the country and they So that means they've committed something they've done something that's got them arrested. Could be murder, could be burglary, could be selling drugs. It could be something, and I say on the low end, and as a DWI, but people who are driving under the influence kill a lot of people each year. So there's nothing minute or minor about that. But that really, you don't have anything on the traffic thing that'll bring you into getting incarcerated. So those type of things, if you get booked into the jail, we check to see if you're in the country legally. If not, then that is reported to ICE. And then it's Immigrations and Customs Enforcement's decision whether they're going to initiate deportation proceedings. And again, I said it's just one more step. We've had MS-13 members come through. We've had MS-13 members come through the jail that would have otherwise been released back out into our community. And I tell you, that's for news. I think everybody's probably familiar, but a very, very violent street gang. And without this program, those individuals would, bond out or eventually be released on their own recognizance. Unfortunately, the program worked great. President Obama was the one who accepted us and put us in when he expanded the program in 2015 or 16. And then when President Trump came into office, it became a target of so many different organizations and groups. Again, a program that was started by a Democrat, and this is kind of what we were talking about before the meeting started. People have changed their tunes. This is targeting people who are in the country, not only in the country illegally. It is not targeting those people who have come here trying to make a better life for themselves. It's targeting those people who are committing crimes and are also in the country illegally. And again, it might be you might have people who are guilty or convicted or arrested for burglary who aren't deported because Immigration and Customs Enforcement deports on their own priorities and whatever they know about the individual that's not part of our official record. And you might have somebody who has a DUI that they decide to deport. So really, whatever gets you arrested isn't the thing that gets you deported. It's what ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, knows about that individual or what their violation, again, overstaying a visa versus entering the country illegally. So with that said, there's something else I wanted to say there. Since President Biden came into office, I think we've had two people. If you look at the border is an absolute mess. The fentanyl that we're seeing in the country, I'm afraid that we're going to see, where I told you we had 3 years of declining overdoses. Fentanyl is everywhere and in everything. We're seeing, it used to be just heroin, and then heroin got mixed with fentanyl. Then it was straight fentanyl, and now fentanyl is getting mixed with everything. Cocaine, crack, every drug out there, they seem to be mixing with fentanyl. And I don't even understand the chemistry of it, but I know it kills a lot of people. So, that can be largely attributable to our Homeland Security people not being allowed to do their job. But I have been concerned that President Biden may shut down the 287G program, but so far they have kept it intact. However, they are not taking action on many, many people. I can tell you that. So with that, I talked about I should talk about the community survey. After the death of George Floyd, myself and a few other police chiefs from the county, Bel Air, Aberdeen, and Harvard Grace, were contacted by a conglomeration of organizations here in the county, the Caucus of African American Leaders, the Harford County chapter of the NAACP, Bridge, Maryland, and the Together We Will group, under the banner of equal justice. I think it was equal justice for all. And they had a list of 10 demands, 10 things that they wanted to see law enforcement and public safety do in following the death of George Floyd. Most of them, we were things we were already doing. We were way ahead of the curve compared to some police departments in the country. In fact, I was shocked, and I wrote in my response that if police departments waited until George Floyd died on the street to start establishing relationships with their community, they've already waited too long, and there's no coming back from that. This Harford County Sheriff's Office will be 250 years old in 2 years, 248 years of history. And I can tell you, coming out of the state police, coming here, this organization has an exceptional relationship with the community. And I hope that during my 7 years that we've made every effort to, and I hope we've taken it to a new level even again and built on it. But their number one request was that we do a community survey to evaluate what the community felt about the men and women of law enforcement in our county. And I told them I wasn't concerned about that. I'd be happy to do it. We had already surveyed crime victims once since I had been here, but the survey was going to, my requirements for the survey is that it had to be completely anonymous, that it had to be completely random, and that it had to be countywide. And working with members from the 3 police departments, Eric Roby from my office was our liaison with the work group, and then members from those organizations, they interviewed different survey companies, laid down the criteria, what they were looking for. And eventually we found, it took a lot longer than we thought. I committed $10,000 to the project. The towns, I think it was like $1,500 for each town. And then Barry Glassman gave some money to those organizations so that they could pay part of it. But we did get a product. We recently put the results of that survey up on our website, and the survey company themselves said they had never seen results this good. In years of doing these sort of public safety surveys, they had never seen results so high. Just some of the numbers that question 1, are you satisfied with the job your sheriff's office or police department does providing public safety to the county? 87% were either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. How safe do you feel in your community? That was question 2. 98% reported feeling very safe or mostly safe. Question 3, how would you describe the relationship between community and deputies or police? 83% reported excellent or very good. And I just share a link with this, or I can have Eric send it to you instead of reading them all, but all of our numbers were through the roof. And I was thinking, I knew numbers would be good. I didn't expect they would be that good. And now I'm afraid to ever do a survey again because I don't know that we can match being that good. But again, it does speak to the character, I think, of the men and women of the Harford County Sheriff's Office who serve our community, and the 3 municipal agencies, Bel Air, Aberdeen, Havre de Grace, and their police officers. Not that we are perfect. I can tell you during my 7.5 years, I think I'm at 17 people I've had to fire. So many so early on that every first day for an employee, whether we're hiring 15 for an academy class or whether we're hiring 1 crossing guard, I meet with them here in my conference room. If I'm not available that first day, as soon as I can afterward, and they get my 5-minute welcome aboard. We need the help. We need your service. You did a lot to get here. Please don't make me fire you. And I let them know that there is only one thing for integrity violations, things like lying, like racial profiling, like discrimination, and that's you'll be fired. And you can look at our matrix. That's the penalty for it. And I've had 17 people take me up on it. I said, as a politician, and I've had those short. Oh, somebody found the link. Thank you for whoever did that. I saw it. I saw it shoot up there. As a politician, I have people give me money, give me sign locations, and I've had people call me and say, well, Joe only did this or that. And I said, I can't put him in there. I cannot have a police officer whose word should be taken, with a little more credibility than the next man or woman, because their word can put people in jail. If I can't trust them, they're not going on the street. And I've had about 17 of them. So not that any organization is perfect, but I do think that survey results, I was very pleased with them. I think they shocked some other people that they were so good. But I knew they would be good. I just didn't know they would be that good. So that, and really, talk about COVID some if you want. How we've handled the COVID, the governor's COVID. Is that something that anybody cares about?
Yeah, before we do that, Sheriff, can we have a few Q&A? I know a few questions were texted. Arshad, did you want to start with a Q&A?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you again, Sheriff, for joining us tonight. Certainly appreciate your participation in
Absolutely.
our discussion here. And your talk in the beginning here was very enlightening. So thank you for sharing all of the facts and the figures and progress that your office has made over the past few years. And I think as a general rule, most of us agree here, or maybe I'm speaking for myself, that the Harford County Sheriff's Office truly is wonderful for us and has been. So thank you for your service there.
Thank
you. So well, before I maybe go to my first question, I thought I did see someone's hand up. I don't know if it was, I think it may have been Faisal.
So it was Faisal that raised his hand, but I believe he might be.
Okay. So then I'll continue with my question. So let's get back to the opioid issue in the county here. Obviously, it's the addiction itself, and whether it's opioids or fentanyl or heroin, or what it does is it leads to so much more crime in any neighborhood where you introduce this. Unfortunately, we've seen on the national level that the Sackler family and Pfizer group, who initiated opioids, basically got a slap on the wrist and said, okay, you can still move along with your billions of dollars. Yet we all have to suffer the consequences of those who are addicted and therefore are almost forced into sometimes criminal activity. Now, and so it's great news to hear that the numbers are trending down. I think that we're all glad to see that. What, number one, in your opinion, has caused that decline? And number two, how can we make it go further now?
Well, and I will give credit where I think credit's due. And I wrote a letter to this extent. President Trump's border wall. When President Trump was in office, not only was it the starting of the building of the border wall, there was also just more security at our southern border, and that certainly slowed down. I saw I had DEA presentations, class from DEA, where they said in Colombia they were mowing under their marijuana fields because so much marijuana is being grown here in the United States, either through medical or recreational legalization, that they were getting rid of any kind of marijuana fields and planting poppy in order to process heroin and bring it into the United States. Most of the fentanyl at the time was coming through China, but our southern border was completely unprotected. Walk across, and it's about where we are again today, unfortunately. So if you see some of the numbers of what's coming in, talk to some of the sheriffs down the southern border. Fentanyl and other opioids, other drugs are just flowing into the country. Without cooperation from the federal government to stem that tide, I'm afraid the numbers are going to tick back up. And you're right, we did have, and we do have, a lot of associated crime. I can tell you, every time we locked up one particular individual, as soon as he got out of jail, which was usually the next day, and we started getting car break-ins, we knew exactly who it was going to be. And we locked up the same guy probably 10 times since I've been sheriff. And he'll serve a couple weeks or something, and he'll be right back out. And until you can deal with the addiction and actually, or they die, and unfortunately too many of them were dying, until you can get them to, and I've always said they have to hit their very, very lowest point before they are willing to make that change. Unfortunately for many, it's death. But working with the county executive, again, with our partners, we did so many things here in this county on an educational front, on a treatment front, the Klein Family Crisis Center with the Upper Chesapeake. The governor put money in for that. We just, a whole bunch of different initiatives, our Hope House. We have another one that we're still getting ready to launch, a partnership we haven't announced yet, but it should be coming within the next couple of months. We did legislation. We did a tracking, trying to targeting our dealers. We didn't take it's a cop problem, go arrest the dealers and put them in jail and forget about the rest. Harford County, truly, everybody got together, worked together, and I think that is how we started to bring those numbers down. Hopefully we can continue to get them the trend down, because I'm afraid they'll stick back up. And again, we have we deal with criminals not by oversaturating an area where a lot of crime is, but finding out who the problem people are and targeting that person. My colonel gives the example. It's like fishing with a spear instead of a net. You're not just trying to cover, an entire area that seems to be plagued. We have certain neighborhoods, particularly in the southern part of the county, where the majority of our violent crime happens. But we know who the players are, and we target those individuals and try to get them off the street before they commit the more serious offense. And I think having that proactive approach to policing that you are not seeing most places in the state, certainly not in Baltimore City and across this country, is what helps keep our crime numbers lower and contributes to keeping, we know who the dealers are, do what we can. We just took 2 off last week. I don't know if you saw the news reports on that. I did a little press thing.
Yes.
Individual sold, killed a young man. We were able to link him back to another death back in October, and they set up a sting. They were able to arrest him. And I can tell you, before they even started getting their ink wet to put on the papers, he was already out of jail.
Yeah,
So,
that was the sad part of it, that he's
yes.
already out. Yeah.
So, that's why there's only 260 people in the jail currently, because and I gave it on the news piece. You face more time in the state of Maryland for possession with intent to distribute fentanyl than you do for killing somebody by selling them fentanyl. And Eric Roby, my legislative director here, and he's still on. And we took a bill to Teresa Riley, Delegate Teresa Riley, back, I think in my second year, and it would have made selling fentanyl, heroin, opioids that result in a death a 30-year felony. And Maryland's legislators didn't want any parts of entertaining that. They didn't even want to consider it. And we've taken a couple cases federal where they do face a sentence of 30 years. But you have to, for the federal government to adopt a case, it's a lot more time consuming than it should be, considering the volume of cases that we have. So I hope I didn't go too astray with my answer to that question. I think it's all around approach on how we've handled it and the crime associated with the opioid epidemic.
Having grown up in New York, even as Giuliani became mayor, one of the things that I saw, I was very young at that time, but still in college probably, or even earlier, high school, the night and day difference between when Giuliani first came on board and then the drug scene was happening in New York. Once he cleaned up the drug scene, it was a night and day difference for us as well. So the little things that we used to have to do during those days, for example, securing our vehicle, we would have to remove the radio from our car. We had those handle radios, and put on the magic jack on our steering wheel, and sometimes even cut, we had wires underneath that we would remove, because cars were getting stolen every day. And we saw a huge difference, the type of cleanup because of the drugs that he cleaned up. So that's why I'm always for, if we can get to the drugs, I think you can also take care of a lot of the other crimes that are happening in your area.
I will tell you real quick, so we can move forward, but we had 2 gentlemen that we arrested. It's the only 2 that we charged with violating the governor's curfew order for being out when they weren't supposed to. They came here to Harford County from Baltimore City because A, they know that people in Harford County have good stuff, and B, that they feel safe and they don't lock their car doors at night. So they were breaking into cars in the middle of the night, and we caught them, and that's what they told us. If they're doing it, they're not alone. I read so many reports, it seemed to have trailed off, but even today, it amazes me. My wife barely lets me have $20 in my wallet when I go out. How many people leave, $1,500 or their laptop or their iPad in their unlocked vehicle overnight, or the car keys. So we do get a lot of theft from autos, and that is all 99% opioid related. So they still happen. So I encourage, we live in a safe place, but I still encourage locking your doors and removing your valuables, wallets, purses, out of the car at night.
Yeah, that's certainly good advice. I have a couple of other questions, Umesh, but maybe you want to allow others to join first.
Sure. So, Sharif, I do have this question from the community. Since the unfortunate event of killing of George Floyd, more than 20 major cities have reduced the police budgets and are gearing towards defunding the police department. What would you tell those that promote defunding the police department?
A big mistake. I mean, and you're seeing a lot of those jurisdictions now having to refund the police department and struggling. And I can tell you, recruitment for law enforcement and corrections is horrific. And here in the county, we're seeing low numbers like we've never seen before. And I told you we're trying to expand our numbers with the coming precinct. We are finding it challenging to fill our spots, and most of our like lateral police officers are police officers trying to escape from Baltimore City. You know, one of the places that talked about defunding, I don't think the consent decree didn't allow them to move forward on defunding, but you're seeing a lot of the big cities like Seattle that went through it. Now they are offering bonuses to try to get retired police officers to come back, so their budgets are going up. LA did the same thing. You know, again, one police officer who, one or three or four, you know, that were involved in that incident are not indicative of the work of 800,000 men and women across this country. And that is just 100% wrong approach. And unfortunately, that's our media approached that incident, and that's how our country approached that incident. Again, I just told you what the survey results were here in Harford County. And yet a year and a half earlier, we had, 400 people protesting out in front of our building for multiple days. People saw something that no one liked what they saw, but they blamed everyone that was wearing a uniform and a badge, and that is wrong. And, unfortunately, I think the media is to blame for stirring that pot and taking it down the road they did. At the time, it's the same thing. You will never be able to judge an entire incident, even that one, I had other police chiefs and sheriffs saying it was murder watching 15 seconds of videotape. You can't do it. We have a criminal justice system, a process, and maybe not perfect, but I still believe it's the best one in the world. And you have to let it do its job. And till all the facts come out, and even to this day, I didn't sit through and watch the entire trial. I'm not even sure if the whole thing was. I know portions of it were released on TV. I don't know if the whole thing was. The only people who know the entire facts of that case are the people who were in that courtroom and that jury. And it was their job, and they did their job, and we hope they got it right. And the same thing for any other case around the country. No 5-second, 10-second videotape of a police or use of force is going to look good. And that's what I try to tell every group I talk to. It's going to look bad. It's going to look ugly. Because uses of force don't look pretty. So, if you have somebody using a taser, if you have somebody using a baton, if you have somebody using a firearm, it's not a pretty thing. It's not a pretty. There's no way to make it like TV, and that's what I think too many people expect.
Sheriff, you mentioned training academy, and obviously you're a well-educated person yourself. What kind of training are you offering your officers? Many people criticize police forces around the nation for a lack of education on the police officer parts. I mean, some of them are high school graduates only. They may not have the skills necessary to deal with the community on a variety of issues. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't have the whole list of curriculum. I can tell you when I went through the police academy in 1986, I'm old. When I went through the police academy in 1986, it was 22 weeks long. So in order to meet the standards that the state has in place for a police officer certification, it took the Maryland State Police 22 weeks. The academy is now 29 weeks. So nearly 2 months have been added of additional training and curriculum. I can tell you, to a man, to a woman, we put out so much of a better cop today, no matter which police department, than when I was put out on the street years ago. They get every kind of training that people were calling for. And again, that's where I said we were ahead of the curve. I wrote back on that letter saying we already do that. We are de-escalation, no chokehold. We were so far ahead of the curves on most everything, if not everything. Anti-discrimination training, dealing with mental illness. We do a whole bunch of that. I'd have to get a list from my training director. I think it's in the letter I wrote back to them. And we also here recently started a associate's degree program with Harford Community College, so that while our deputies are in the academy, concurrently, they can earn an associate's degree. We've had some issues trying to work out some. I'm hoping to be able to keep it running. We've done it for the last 2 academy classes, but we have had some challenges with it. But they don't pay $1. Part of they're paid a full salary to be there in the academy, and while they're there, they are earning an associate's degree. So they come out very well trained and better educated with an associate's degree, hopefully encouraging them to continue their education. And we have tuition reimbursement here at the Sheriff's Office as well to encourage that. So specifically what all the classes are, I couldn't tell you, but I can tell you they get the tools. Harford County is great. The Working County Executive has been great. I can tell you where I come from in the state police world. We got shirts and pants off the rack that were used. Somebody else had them, turned them in. Gun belts, if they would fit, body armor. Here, our deputies get good equipment. They, their uniforms are purchased for them. Their vests are for them, custom made for them to fit them. They're not swapping off this or that. So they get the tools they need to do the job. They get the training they need to do the job. And I think the survey shows that they do it well.
Sheriff, with my experience as a department, you have always reached out to communities. And I do recall back in the days when Jesse Ben was the sheriff, he had reached out to all the communities, and he had educated and advised people to get to know the sheriff department. And I do recall, by the way, I'm a graduate of 2012 Citizens Academy. We did that. I really enjoyed it. I have utmost respect for the entire department and what you guys do, and I would educate. Actually ask people to join this for their own knowledge, because you guys don't get enough credit for what you do behind the scene, and there's more work involved than we think. While I'm at this, I also want to thank you and your entire department. As a minority, when we were going through the phase of planning our second mosque in the community, we had some backlash, but the support that we got from your department, we really want to thank you for that. I do recall we met with Eric at your headquarters, and he was extremely prompt. Immediately he was in action, and we are very thankful for that as well.
He'll be here tomorrow asking for a raise. Oh my goodness.
No, but Eric always has been very prompt.
Right.
I see that you are a strong advocate of SRO as well. You wanted those in elementary classes as well. Why do you think is that important for our school?
Oh, certainly. I mean, we've seen some school incidents here recently this year. School shooting, big fight down in Montgomery County, where they've tried to pull school resource officers out of all the schools. I think it's become, back in my day, I would have never been a supporter of taking a cop off the street and putting them into a school for an entire day. That school would be within someone's patrol area, and that would be the service that they would get. We are in a different date and time, and unfortunately, the mental health issues behind the opioid epidemic, and they're tied together too. But the mental health issues, I had an individual show up at my door at home the other day because I knocked on the door, talked to my daughter, because he believes I have a device and the state police have a device that we can see him in the bathroom and at his house and into his bedroom. I mean, he's someone who suffers from severe mental health issues, and yet he was able to track me down on the internet and show up at my front door and knock on the door. And a retired trooper, he showed up at her house as well. We have seen these shooters in the schools that think it's a game, to set a new high water mark by shooting more people. And, the saying that when when you need a cop and they're, when seconds matter, they're only minutes away. We live in a different day and age, and we need to have that police car there, that police officer there, that deterrent, a deterrent, and B, if necessary, a method to protect. I can tell you one of the things when I came into office that we found was that a lot of the SROs had been in the same assignment for a while and had kind of become more like ancillary staff to the school, to the principal, kind of doing these jobs or doing this job. We rotated them all around and made it clear to the school board, to the school superintendent, to the different schools, their job is the protection of that school. They shouldn't be in a classroom at 8:05 every day. They're patrols just like on the street. They need to be completely random and ready for anything that happens. So I just think overall we've reached a new date and time, a new place in our world where SROs are a fact of life and are necessary in order to protect our children. I certainly don't want to be my school or anyone in Harford County to have to live through such a traumatic event and knowing that we could have maybe stopped it.
Arshad, do you have a question?
No, I was just going to open it up to the floor to make sure no one else on the floor has any other questions before we continue ours.
Anybody would like to make any comments or has a question for Sheriff? Sheriff, I have a question about the 287G program that you just mentioned. In few countries, they claim that majority of the people that were apprehended were either brown or black or immigrants, and the officers were questioning their immigration status. We do understand that the program is designed for criminals that are already in jail. But as you see that ACLU and many other are fighting really hard to close this program. What would you tell an immigrant in our community or county? How should they feel about this program?
Oh, I think in Annapolis, I've had to testify. I've had to testify in Annapolis, and not until Trump came into office, President Trump. But there has been an effort afoot. We only had it in Frederick County, had it maybe 6 years before Harford, then us, and then Anne Arundel. Then Anne Arundel dropped it, and now Cecil. So it's only operational in 3 counties: Frederick, Harford, and Cecil. But I would tell them, we have had people come in and testify with us from immigrant communities, those communities of people who have came here legally, have gone through all the hoops and challenges and requirements and paperwork and waiting periods to do it legally, that are also aggrieved that, people are able to just come across the border and then without doing it the right way, and on top of that are committing crimes. We've had many in the immigrant community, first generation immigrant community, because we're all immigrants from somewhere, but first generations who are saying, hey, I did it the right way, and I think these programs should continue. If they're going to come this way, they should at least obey the laws otherwise. If you're joining gangs, if you're selling drugs, if you're killing people, raping people, robbing people, I don't want to open the door to the Harford County Detention Center and let you come back into Harford County. And I tell people, no matter what group I'm talking to, my responsibility are the 4 corners of Harford County. If I could deport people to Pennsylvania or Cecil County, make it Sheriff Adams' problem over Cecil County, I would do that too, because my commitment is to the citizens here in Harford County and keeping that crime rate as low as I can for us. And rehabilitation or recidivism only goes so far. Most of the people who go in that jail, just like the guy I told you that we lock up routinely for breaking into cars, are coming back out to offend again. And if I don't have to let them back out into Harford County, I don't want to. You talked about the different people, what the ACLU says, was a whole different conversation. They say a lot of stuff. In 2019, we had 49 individuals of different countries that were logged. Did anybody want to take a guess at what the number one country was for illegal people being in the country illegally, overstaying the visa, entering illegally without authorization?
I would say Mexico.
That's what most people would say, and that's not it.
Wow.
Germany, because I don't think anybody's going to get it. Germany was the number one country in 2019 for us, people who were arrested for something else and brought to the jail and found to be in the country illegally. In 2019, out of 4,519 people who were screened, so that's people who are either arrested and brought in and booked, or people who have gone to court and the judge has sentenced them to time at the jail, 191 foreign-born, 49 different countries, and only of the 191 foreign-born, 43 detainers were lodged. Roughly 10% of that are gang members, including 5 MS-13 members. The 19 numbers are the most recent I have, because all the data belongs to ICE, but that was what they prepared in their annual report. So no, I would argue that it does not discriminate on race, color, or any other criteria somebody wants to throw out there. It simply identifies those individuals who, just like we would if Pennsylvania State Police wanted them, or if Maryland State Police wanted them, or Baltimore County Police wanted them, it identifies those individuals who have paperwork on file, a detainer on file, or should not be here legally, and they report to ICE, and ICE can do what they want with them. We are not an ICE holding facility, so I make no money. There were two, I think it was Howard County and one down the shore, where they had ICE housing agreements where they make $1 million or more a year for housing ICE inmates. If somebody's identified for deportation, ICE has to move them out of my jail to one of the ICE facilities. They can't keep them in my jail. I'm not in this for the money. I'm in this for public safety.
Sharif, we have Faisal here. I believe he had raised hand early in the program. Faisal, do you have a comment or a question for Sharif?
Yes, thank you very much, Sheriff Gahler, for joining us and giving your insight and your valuable comments about the police department. I'm Faisal Saeed, and I represent HIC. I'm currently the president of HIC. First of all, I wanted to thank you very much, the police department. They did a commendable job when we were trying to establish our place of worship here. And we were going through the DAC meeting, and there was a lot of backlash, especially in the social media. And we did get a lot of support from the police department. So I do congratulate you and the whole HIC and the community here are very grateful for you and for your timely intervention, and especially the detectives. They did an excellent job in trying to quell that backlash. So once again, I congratulate you. I do have a question. Since we are a minority community and we are here in Harford County, and the times are changing, and sometimes there is a lot of issues with especially Islamophobia. So my question to you is, do you have specific programs to either provide security to the places of worship, or can you advise us, because there are some members who always have this concern?
Yeah, unfortunately, and as I said, I mean, just like every police department probably across the country, we are stretched thin. And I can tell you, we charge a lot of secondary we have a contract process where many organizations, churches, the state police do the traffic direction down at Mount Christian Church. If you see them down there on Sunday, they have like 3 big services. There's a trooper there probably making $125 an hour to direct traffic on a contract, whatever their contract calls for. We have contracts with the county, the library system, different churches, different places. The only way we would be able to do the security would be through a reimbursable overtime contract. And I can tell you, we have so many of them, we had to add into our contract that although we're requiring you to pay this, this, and this, we may not guarantee you we can show up. And I don't like it at all. I mean, what kind of contract is, I know we have some business owners in here. What kind of contract is that makes you sign for something and get committed to something and we can't guarantee 100% it's going to show up? There are so many requests going on. There are so many jobs out there. I mean, the deputies are worn out of making it's an overtime rate reimbursement that the business gets paid, it gets charged for. There's so much of it out there. We can't get enough of our people. I don't have enough people to work at all. I just had to open it back up to captains who are making something like $125 an hour on overtime. So I would say I don't have the resources, and I don't think any police department does, that they would be able to guarantee you a deputy at a certain spot, of 1 day a week at this time or 2 days a week at this time. I can tell you, I had this conversation at Falston High School. They had a deputy every day that went down there and let the school buses out. And it was one of the first ones I canceled. And I said, if I can't do it for you and do it for no one else, you'll have to pay a contract. And they've gone without ever since. I know that's not a security thing. That was more of a traffic direction thing. But yeah, if I would like to be able to provide for everything our community would like to see, but we just don't have the people for it. So Eric could hook you up with Lieutenant Menzel, who runs our overtime reimbursable, and explain the contract process. You would have a deputy there most of the time. But again, unfortunately, we've had to write into the contracts, even this is not an ironclad guarantee there'll be somebody available.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, Sheriff, for your time. We want to stay within our time limit. It's a few minutes past 9 o'clock. We really appreciate you giving us insight of your department and you answering all the questions that we had. There are a few other questions. I will email it to Eric. And once again, thank you on behalf of our entire community here in Harford County. We appreciate what you have done for us, and we continue to look forward to work with you and your department.
Absolutely. Again, once again, just to close out, thank you for having me be part of the meeting tonight. And I don't know if any of the questions deal with some of the police reform. It was something I was thinking about, talking about the police reform bills from last year. Although there was a little bit of good in there, most of it was terrible, and it concerns me. So I don't know if you have any of those questions, or maybe that will spark someone's interest to send us a question, and we can send some information back on what we didn't like in last year's bills that I think are going to make our county less safe.
Absolutely. Thank you once again, and good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.